Hi, this is Bill Sutton,
And Jason Sutton.
and welcome to another episode of Sutton Impact Family Style.
If you hear a little bit of thunder in the background, that's simply Florida, and there's not a lot we can do about it until we get a proper studio. So
It's been pretty intense the last couple of weeks.
very intense, and I don't think it's going to stop during the. We held off as long as we could today before we recorded, and it is what it is.
If I sound out of breath tonight, I played 4 softball games today in 96-degree heat, and I feel every bit of 66 today.
Yay, Florida!
Yay, Florida. All right, so I want to start our sports business moment off. I want to go back again and look at Big Three basketball.
Okay.
And one of my grad students, Jordan Rutner, wrote a blog on it, and so he and I talked a little bit about it. And I guess the thing in it that really has got my attention now is it really, to me, is barnstorming, because you're just taking it all around the country and you're playing it in markets where people would want to see these players. Like they're in Tulsa this week, which I think could be a home run. I mean,
right, especially if you go to non-NBA
cities, non-NBA markets. And so we were talking, and Jordan had compared it to the Harlem Globetrotters, taking on a tour and everything. And I had said, I think it's more like the Negro Leagues, because it's like taking the stars and you barnstorm and you play all around the country and you pick where you want to go. Not necessarily playing in big arenas. You're going where it was, and that's how you brought up the popularity of it. Now, what the Negro Leagues did is they put, like Satchel Paige and all the Negro stars couldn't play in the major leagues. So you had the black versus white thing. You had the Major League stars after the season would play the Negro League stars, but never during the regular season. Here, you've got basketball and entertainers, and you're taking them on the road. It's a road show, and it seems to make a lot of sense to me if they pick the right markets. And I guess I've been a little skeptical because I'd like to know what the paid attendance is, not the attendance.
Right.
And that's the only thing that's holding me back now. And there's, a couple sponsors, but we're going to have to see how the sponsorship goes, because that's going to drive it. And that's what the networks need, and paid advertisers, if they're going to cover it and everything. I mean, it'll only be new this year. So it's going to come back next year. It's got to have more life on its own. So you need to get to the point where sponsors are willing to associate with this and pay for this. And then the crowd is live, and it's a good crowd, and we'll see what it is. I mean, the other thing about barnstorming is you always play the local team. It was the day where you played a local team. So maybe there's a way of playing, having a big three and maybe not so big three, some lesser players playing against some local people as a preliminary game.
Well, if they could partner with like Hoop It Up.
Yeah.
And as Hoop It Up is having their 3-on-3 tournament, if you win the top division Hoop It Up,
you get to play.
You get to play that whatever celebrity team is going to play you that month when you go in.
I think it's a good. I think it gets the market excited, and it gets people excited. You get that David and Goliath moment. Can you achieve? Can you succeed? Can you do this? Or you get a tryout for the D-League team or something, tied into something. But again, going back to the 3-on-3 in the Olympics and everything, it just is kind of interesting, and it all fits together. And I'm really curious to see how it's going to play out.
And you have to forgive me, I can't remember which 3-on-3 star it was, but today he claimed that if you took the all-stars from that league of retired NBA players and celebrities, that they could beat an NBA team. Was his
way.
I obviously thought no way. I don't think they could beat a top college team. And I think that's part of the issue is the basketball. I mean, I watched some highlights, and the highlights didn't look...
Yeah.
It's not that... I mean, they obviously all know how to play basketball, and the basketball is quality basketball, but it's like a really great rec league game.
Yeah. It's like a
great rec league game.
Rec league game with superstars.
With superstars.
Yeah.
But I mean, the athleticism is still a little bit lacking.
In the speed of the game.
The speed of the game. Either. Right.
I mean, these guys would get run in the ground if they were playing an NBA team. Unless they're playing half court, and we'll see what would happen. But
right. And we don't know what the future is, but I mean, Iverson played 7 minutes and 9 minutes in those 2 games. So, I mean, that's the guy you want to see. And I'm not sure how much he intends on playing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a player coach.
Yeah.
But it seems like he's much more interested in being the coach as opposed to the player coach.
Yeah. And he's a pop culture draw.
Oh, big time.
All right, let's talk about Lonzo.
You want to go right to Lonzo?
Let's get right to Lonzo.
He had a very rough first game.
Very rough first
game. As everybody notices.
Couldn't shoot. Yeah. Had the first great pass that people were expecting from him. But in the offense, and if you're thinking about he's going to be a shooter, I know he's a pass-first point guard. But he had a lot of shots, and just the shot is funky.
Open shots. It's a weird shot. It's one of those shots that not to bring up rec league again, but in rec league you'll play with a guy that has just this hideous shot that somehow goes in.
Yeah.
Like some sort of line drive from the corner, but he's got it down. He's been doing it that way his whole life. And like, I wonder, his shot is not quick either.
No,
it's
it
a
takes
low
a while to
release
get
point,
it off. Yes.
and it's a low release point.
Yep.
It's a slow release.
Yep.
And I feel like obviously in summer league and in regular season, but in playoff basketball where people are up on you, and the defense is really intense. Like I don't know if he can get his shot off as quick, like in the way that he's going to be able to need to do.
No, I don't know if he can either.
To his credit, he bounced back and had that triple-double in the loss against the Celtics. And win-loss in Summer League is whatever.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to see people.
But he's a story. Tickets for going for over $300.
And the one thing I noticed about Lonzo is, I forget, somebody posterized him in that first game. And he was, I feel like his dad has brought so much heat on him that he's just got that target on his back. So if he's able to withstand, because I feel like every time they know that if the play involves Lonzo, it's going to be on TV. Yeah. I'm going to be on SportsCenter.
Yeah.
So if he's guarding me,
to get on SportsCenter.
If he's guarding me and I school on him, I'm going to get on SportsCenter.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going against him on defense and I block his shot, I steal the ball, I'm going to get on SportsCenter.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got this huge target on his back that if he can overcome it, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah.
And like I said, I like the fact that he came out and he rebounded well. He attacked the basket against the Celtics. I feel like with the modern NBA, the triple-double is sort of like the 300-yard passing game.
Yep.
Where the game is so much faster. There's so many more shots, so much more emphasis on offense that it's easier to rack up offense, And with people shooting threes, you get a lot of long rebounds. Not to take away the triple-double as a stat.
Mm-hmm.
But you look at last year where, obviously Westbrook averaged a triple-double. Harden averaged almost a triple-double. LeBron averaged almost a triple-double. Yep. And this was something that was such a huge deal years ago. Yep. And now it's just so much more common. I feel like it's almost there's not a given night where there's not a triple-double in the league.
Sure.
In other basketball news, the Warriors re-signed Pachulia. They re-signed Iggy. They added Swaggy P, for whatever that's worth. And it looks like going into next season, barring maybe one or two players, the Warriors are going to roll out that exact same team.
Pretty much. Health will be the issue.
Health will be the issue. But,
see how it goes.
And you look at the Cavs, they brought back Kyle Korver. And they have basically the same team they had last year that weren't good enough to beat the Warriors. Mm-hmm. In Boston, you lost Avery Bradley, but you added Gordon Hayward and Jason Tatum, your first-round pick. But again...
Those are two nice pieces.
Those are two nice pieces. And moving forward, those are very nice pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And if Isaiah's coming back healthy off that hip injury, which, depending on which story you want to read, he is or he isn't, they could be very interesting in the East again and maybe give the Cavs more than they're worth. But again, you look at all the teams making moves, and the one that kind of shocks me the most is the Timberwolves making all the moves they're making. Mm-hmm. They obviously traded for Jimmy Butler. They signed Taj Gibson, so they're bringing back the Thibodeau Bulls.
Yep.
I don't know as of right now, but they were the favorites to get Jamal Crawford after his buyout. So it looks like the Timberwolves are all in on trying to win now.
Or at least be in the mix.
At least be in the mix.
Yeah.
With Karl Anthony Towns and Gibson and Jimmy Butler, you're having a very defensive-oriented, crazy, tough team. Mm-hmm. A big team.
Yeah.
And it looks like Thibodeau it looks like his plan, at least, is to attack he doesn't want to go Warriors to Warriors. Because as long as they're constructed and healthy the way they are, you can't beat the Warriors at the Warriors game.
No. You can't.
You have the two best shooters in the last decade in the NBA, and then you have Kevin Durant. You have Draymond Green. The way that team is set up, you're not going to beat them at their game.
No, you got to force them to play out of their... You got to make them uncomfortable.
Right.
Make them play a style that they're not used to playing. And make them put some of those guys on the bench to contend with what you have.
And outside of the Cavs, you have LeBron James. The team that gave them the absolute most trouble was Oklahoma City 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And one of the things Oklahoma City had was a lot of size that was just dominating the boards.
Yeah.
And they had athletes.
But they just couldn't play in the fourth quarter, remember?
No.
I'm still sad about that.
It's very sad. And now we are going to talk, before we get to our AFC South preview, we have not discussed anything on the McGregor-Mayweather fight.
We haven't. And so my initial impression is, McGregor's a great story. He's great copy. He's great press conference. Great charisma. But he's at an unbelievable disadvantage in this fight. Because you're taking somebody that can fight 3 or 4 different ways, and you're saying, no, you have to do this. You can only fight one way. And, that's not what an MMA fighter does.
No, and even with a boxing background like McGregor, that's not what he does.
No. And, I mean, it's going to be hard for him to fight his natural instincts as to what he should do at any given time during this fight. Because he can't do what he would normally do.
Right, and if you hesitate for half a second when you think you're going to kick somebody, your instincts are like, go for the leg.
Yep.
You can't do that against a boxer.
No, you can't.
And the other big thing is the boxer he's going against. And for as much, heat as he takes for, fighting the people he's fought or fighting the style that he fights, like, Floyd Mayweather is not going to beat himself.
No.
Floyd Mayweather does not give you an opportunity to knock him out.
No. He's
perfectly fine to dodge and jab and dance around the ring. And I mean dance in a boxing way, not in, calling him like chicken or anything like that. That's what he does.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's going to be his exact plan going forward in that fight.
Yeah, and my initial instincts were this was going to be a 3-4 minute fight. But no, I don't think it is. I think it's going to be longer just because of Mayweather's style. And Mayweather's going to carry it in hopes that maybe there's another payday down the line.
Right.
And, a lot of people are going to buy it. And it's going to make everybody a lot of money. But I still don't think it's going to be great TV.
Now, I've never been the biggest MMA fan. I mean, if it's one of the giant fights that sort of becomes the, part of the zeitgeist that even your mom knows about this fight.
Right.
I'll tune in. But this fight, but even then, I'll, if I'm at somebody's house and they have it on, or I'm at a bar and it's on, then I'm going to watch. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to order it at home. But this is a fight that, even though it seems pretty ridiculous, and I feel like I can already see what's going to happen before it happens, I do want to watch it. Like, I do want to go out of my way to figure out a place, I'm probably not going to pay whatever ridiculous price it is. I don't know how much it's going to be to order it. But I do want to watch this fight. Because I am curious.
I think everybody's curious.
And I know the hope for some people is that the video that's leaked out of McGregor boxing has sort of been him just sort of leaking out the bad footage and sort of playing possum and lowering expectations. Because again, when he's been sparring with, professional boxers, not professional MMA fighters, he's not looked good. And again, like you said, I mean, it's one of those things, like if you fight a certain style your whole life and you're able to grab and you're able to kick and you're able to knee and you're able to elbow, all things you can't do in boxing, and that's part of your instinct. Mm-hmm. That if you hesitate for the half a second, that's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
And again, if he was fighting a different fighter, if he was fighting like a puncher, somebody that was going to try and knock McGregor out, then you feel like McGregor's got a chance to go punch for punch with somebody and maybe land something.
Yeah.
But the way Floyd fights, like, it's just hard to imagine him. I mean, against the best boxers in the world, they don't get to hit him in the head.
No, I mean, he frustrates other people's style. So it'd be obvious to me that he would frustrate McGregor even more.
Right.
Because McGregor's fights are pretty quick. So we'll see how this goes. But
in long term, if McGregor goes out and gets embarrassed in this fight, what does that do to the UFC? Does that do any effect on the UFC?
I don't think so, because I think they're all going to point out the same, it's like I said to you, if I have 5 arrows in my quiver and you tell me I can only use 1, I mean, I'm not doing what I do best.
Right.
So, if anything, it's almost like the line, I'm spotting the other guy, I'm giving him points, because I'm not doing what I usually do.
Does boxing have anything to gain? Because it feels like in the last decade, boxing has sort of fallen by the wayside. Like, UFC definitely took it over. UFC is definitely if you look at real fighting outside of the WWE, UFC is the sport.
Boxing needs a charismatic champion. They don't have one.
No. But even with Mayweather, it didn't feel, outside of his fights, it didn't feel like
he's not that charismatic, though. I mean, he's great after the game talking about it, but he doesn't do anything in the interim. He's quiet.
Right.
He doesn't really do anything. But he doesn't have to either. But, if you're saying you want boxing to be these things, then you got to have somebody step up and be this guy. And be involved in a number of different things. And keep boxing in the forefront. And boxing's just not in the forefront.
No, far from it.
Yeah.
And maybe if we had another Tyson kind of just scary, dominant fighter that knocked people out. And
totally dominant. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And you feel like boxing is the one sport you look at historically, they'll either get that or they'll manufacture that at some point if they need it.
Do their best to get it.
Do their best to get it. Last week we talked NFC South.
Mm-hmm.
We're staying in the same region, we're moving over to the AFC.
Okay.
We'll start with a lot of people's, sort of sleeper team to be the team in the AFC, and that's Tennessee. A lot of people are very high on Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Mariota coming here with second season. I'm not sold on Mariota as a quarterback still. I feel like when I watch Mariota play, he reminds me of Kaepernick when the 49ers were good. That when you ask him to do, a couple little things here and there, he gets it done.
Mm-hmm.
And with, a good defense and that running game they had between, DeMarco Murray and Derrick Henry and a few play action passes. But I don't know if you're down in the fourth quarter against the Patriots, I don't know if Mariota is the kind of quarterback that can bring you back. And that's just based on what I saw at Oregon and what I've seen in the pro so far.
Okay, first of all, I don't think there's any quarterback that's going to come back against the Patriots in the fourth quarter. So let's take the Patriots out of the equation.
Pretend that, Roethlisberger and Rodgers and Breeze and the corpse of Peyton Manning or somebody, I don't know.
It is sad. But, yeah, I mean, what do you think about their defense?
The defense is, they added Logan Ryan from the Patriots. I think they've got a pretty solid defense. I mean, they added, Corey Davis. They've got Delonte Walker. They've got a solid offense. I just feel like they're one of those teams that are just not quite there. If I'm being honest, they are my pick to win this division.
Okay.
I think that, I think it's between them and a team we'll discuss later in the Houston Texans, but I feel like, Mariota is probably, outside of the team we're going to discuss next, which is the Indianapolis Colts, he might be the most consistent quarterback in that division. I know I just disparaged him for 5 minutes.
I know, but no argument here. He's very consistent. He's just not, doesn't make you feel he's the guy that can go and perform a miracle when you need it. It just doesn't seem that's not who he is.
And part of that is I remember when he was drafted. I don't watch a ton of college football, but I watch the draft like it's religion. And he just seemed like one of those quarterbacks that he just didn't have any sort of charisma. It seemed like he was a great teammate, but he wasn't the guy to go in there and he just commanded the huddle.
Mm-hmm.
He was a very intelligent person, very very well liked, but he didn't seem to have just that fire. And maybe maybe it's a quiet fire that I'm just not giving him credit for, but I know that was sort of a knock from other draftniks. And I'm not a professional draftnik by any stretch, but that perhaps he was just not that guy. And again, like I said, maybe he'll surprise me, and like I said, I'm still picking them to win the division. I think their defense, their running game,
okay,
the pieces they added on offense, and their schedule is going to help them get over there.
They're not my pick to win the division.
All right. Next we go to, I guess what's been one of the more disappointing teams over the last few years, and that's the Indianapolis Colts.
I don't know if they're disappointing or just overhyped. I mean, they're always overhyped.
They have been overhyped for a long time, yes. Even when they had Manning some years, it was like they played in a bad division in a dome, and they sneak into the playoffs and get crushed.
No, I mean, I think Luck's a good quarterback. I think he's a great quarterback. I think that he's susceptible to getting knocked out of the games. He's highly susceptible to injury. I've not seen anything on an offensive line that indicates to me this year that he's going to be protected better than he was last year.
No. And again, that's a team where you got to look. I remember even going back to the Peyton Manning days, like their front office, they've never seemed to put out a complete team.
No.
And in the last few years, he's the ageless wonder in Frank Gore behind. But you sort of feel like Frank Gore shouldn't be your best running back at this stage.
Not at this stage.
No.
Not as old as he is. Not how much. And
I know he put almost 1,000 yards last year, which I know in a 17-game or 16-game season isn't quite as impressive as it used to be. But I don't feel like Frank Gore should still be your starting running back. And again, they had he's gone now, but they had Andre Johnson on that team past his prime, and it seemed like they were like, we've got this thing in Luck. Let's just throw as many vets around him and just see what we can do.
It seems like their approach is, we're really close. Let's add a couple of retreads and see if we can get there.
Right. And I don't think they've been as close. Right.
No, they're not that close. And the retreads are, they're still good players, but they're shed of what they were.
And they've seemed to have fallen in love. And again, in this year, in the NFL more so than ever, you can have the small wide receiver succeed. But it seems like they've just sort of, they throw out like, what was it? the Washington Redskins had that group of like tiny little receivers.
Oh, Smurfs.
The Smurfs.
Yeah.
And it seems like for 2 or 3 years in a row they've drafted, because T.Y. Hilton is pretty fantastic.
He is very good.
But then they drafted Dorsett out of Miami, who was basically a T.Y. Hilton clone, just not as talented. And then they have another guy like that. So they haven't given Andrew Luck, they keep giving him the same player over and over again.
And they don't have the big, tall, rangy receiver that can do things.
No.
And they don't have the guy possession receiver go over the middle.
Which I think they thought they could just throw in Andre Johnson and he'd be able to, divide the fountain of youth. And once again, I mean, they've made some moves on defense, but I feel like they've always been a bad defensive team. Like, I think when it was in Peyton Manning's time, it seemed like they put all their all their chips on the offensive side of the ball. They were like, we have Manning, we're gonna keep the Ferrari as tight as possible. We'll let the defense just sort of whatever happens.
They've also had a couple players like Dwight Freeney and other players.
They get a couple players here and there, Mathis in a pass rush, but I mean they never had like a solid defense, and I don't think they really have it now.
No, I see them third.
Like again, they're predicted the over under for them is 9 wins, and I don't see them winning 9 games.
I think they're 7-9, 8-8 best.
And again, they just sort of flutter right in the middle. Probably the most interesting team in the division is the Houston Texans.
Absolutely. My pick to win the division. J.J.
Watt's coming back. It looked like Jadeveon Clowney finally proved that he was the player that he thought he was going to be. You got Whitney Merciless, and Merciless, besides being a great name, was obviously just a beast. They've always had a good secondary. They've got DeAndre Hopkins on offense. Lamar Miller, a fairly solid offensive line. I mean, no team is probably as stacked across the offensive line as they want to be, but they've been pretty much their entire existence lacking a quarterback.
And so, do we think, and obviously I do, that they can put a quarterback in there that can manage what they have and still manage to win what's not a highly competitive division, in my estimation.
Now, in your opinion, though, is that quarterback going to be Tom Savage, or is it going to be Deshaun Watson, their first-round pick from this year?
It's Tom Savage.
Really?
The player's choice. Yeah, I think that's who it's going to be. Now, I think Deshaun Watson is the future. I just don't think the future's this year. I think they're going to play Savage, and he's going to come in, and they're going to give him the keys to the car, and they're going to take him as far as they can go. It reminds me of Denver, when Peyton's last year there, where he was nothing, but he didn't screw it up.
Right.
And all the other pieces worked out. That to me is what this team is. They're
right.
Close, and if they get somebody can score, put maybe 17 to 20 points up a game and get a good defense, maybe get a turnover or a special teams touchdown, I think they win the division.
It's very true. Because when you have DeAndre Hopkins on the outside and you match up with that defense, a very solid running game, you kind of do. You just need that, the horrible term, the manager. You need somebody to go back there.
Yes.
Keep the defense honest.
Yes.
Make the throws he can make. Don't turn the ball over. Deshaun Watson's one of those guys that, when you watch him in interviews, he does seem to have that it factor.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like teams rally around him. And again, you remember the national championship game. They were down, and he led them back.
And who's to say they don't put a package in for him and he plays 4 or 5 plays a game? I don't know.
That's true.
That could happen.
And we finish up the division with another hometown team who I think will probably come in, I don't even know, last in the division?
Probably. I mean, they could surprise and finish third. I don't think they could ever finish higher than third.
No. And that is mainly due to the fact that the Jacksonville Jaguars still have Blake Bortles at the helm.
And I don't know what I think about Blake Bortles. I mean, he's a turnover machine. But is that a function of something else?
All of his stats seem to come late in the game when the game's out of reach. And the other team is just sort of sitting back, letting him do it. Because it feels like, they added Leonard Fournette this year to a team that already has a lot of weapons on offense.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's always had a very nice, between Allen Robinson and some of those other guys, they've got good receivers.
They do.
The guys that get open, they want to be on other teams. The running back between, I just remember having him on fantasy. T.J. Yeldon and some of those guys were not putting up bad numbers.
No, I like T.J. Yeldon. I think he's good.
Right, you add Leonard Fournette. Jacksonville's defense, I think, showed flashes at times. It seems like they're finally getting the personnel that the coach wants to run his scheme.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I it's obviously the cliche, and everybody says it every time because it's true, but you have to have a quarterback to win in this league. And Blake Bortles is starting to look like he's just not a quarterback to win in this league.
No, I'm thinking this is your make or break year on Blake Bortles.
Because he's been this is his 4th season now.
Yeah.
And again, coming out of where I went to grad school at UCF, people talked about him as like a young Ben Roethlisberger, like the sort of big, strong-arm kid. He could fling the ball down the field and do the things they needed to do. But again, he just hasn't looked good. And early in games, when you need people to make plays, he doesn't make plays.
There's a lot of difference between the American Conference at the college level and the American Conference at the NFL level.
Right. And I saw those, I looked up his stats today. They're almost all pretty heavy. Like when they're down by 2 or more touchdowns, that's when his passer rating goes up. That's when he throws most of his touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
That's when he's putting up the stats that make you... It almost seems like you wouldn't want him at all as your quarterback if you looked at him for the first half of games.
Yeah.
But then when he puts up these strong, garbage time stats that I think give you that element. If you're the coach, you're like, well, maybe we just got to get...
Yeah, that's,
Because again, I don't think there's any question about his physical talent. He's big, he's mobile, and he's got a cannon for an arm. He's got all the qualities physically that you want in a quarterback.
Potentials will get you fired, though.
It does. But having those qualities keeps you a job year after year after year. Because people are like, well, you can't teach that arm.
Well, what do you think about the New York Giant mentality that's come back now to this team, or identity, I would say?
How so?
With the former Giants coaches now back there in player personnel side.
Well, the Giants, they won 2 Super Bowls.
Under him.
So you can't knock it.
Yeah.
And they won with a quarterback that...
And he was there one time.
Yeah.
And they were good when he was there. That was a playoff appearance when he was there.
And Eli Manning, I feel like, over the course of the last 20 years, is probably the most difficult quarterback to put into any sort of historical context or any discussion about how good he is, how bad he is.
Yeah.
Because he's so
consistently.
During those 2 Super Bowl runs, he looked like as good as any quarterback I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm. And
there are games in the regular season where you look at his stats, and you look at the guys around him, and he just puts it up. And then there's games where you just, he looks like a rookie that's never played football. It's just, and he's consistent. He's consistently inconsistent, which is never a good thing to be. Yeah. So you got the Houston Texans winning the division. I'm going Tennessee, which is sort of the standard cliche NFL, sexy pick of the week. But I think their coaching and their run defense is going to,
I'm going to go Houston, Tennessee, Indianapolis, Jacksonville. That's my order.
And I'm going to go Tennessee, Houston, I suppose Indianapolis, Jacksonville, assuming that Andrew Luck is able to come back from that shoulder this year. And I think that's been about a half hour. We are starting to get some reviews on iTunes, and we appreciate that very much. I will say the process is slightly more annoying than you think, but if you go to your iTunes, you find our podcast, and then there's a little tab that says review, then you can go and give us reviews, which we really appreciate because you get the reviews, you move up the charts, hope you get more people. And please go to Sutton Impact Family Style on Patreon and continue to help us keep the lights on, and not only keep the lights on, but eventually grow the show into something more visually impressive, hopefully, visual show. And we'll talk to you next week.
In AFC Central next week?
AFC North?
AFC North.
We can go AFC North. That's fine.
AFC North.
That's going to be a long discussion on the AFC North, so be ready.
One-sided as well.
Yeah, very one-sided.
Thanks for listening.